Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS.
Welcome back to another IntelliJAM. I'm excited. My favorite types of jams. We've got a customer coming on. I've got Amanda Siegel, who is Director E-commerce at Scale Media. And I'm really excited for this one because Amanda and I were talking maybe like 2 weeks ago at this point. And Amanda referred to herself as, I think I'm just a little bit crazy about this. And my response was, I love crazy. And that is the best type of person to come on the podcast. And Amanda, when you were referring to yourself as crazy, I think what we were talking about at the time is this concept of like CRO and testing and having everything kind of like line up to a very clean, very specific metric. So what I was hoping we could jam on today is kind of like your thoughts on trying to manage testing to a very specific metric, and where do we think this goes if that's a wrong way or maybe not the most right way of doing this and there's a crazier, better way of doing it. Let's go through what that crazy, better way of doing it is. So maybe let's start with, hey, managing to a specific metric. Why is that flawed? What metric are people like mostly managing to? And like, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think when CRO first started and when I first started in this, there was a lot of really basic things we didn't really understand about websites. And they're like CRO in the way everyone thinks about it. It's like a title test, a CTA color, and there is a lot of success in that, but it's a really flat, like you're affecting one small element. And I don't see testing as like CRO anymore. I think testing is the tool to help us achieve certain things or validate certain things. Because if obviously things aren't real, if there's no numbers or data to prove it. So testing is just kind of like a support system. And like when you think about if, CRO is based on the basic scientific method, you find a hypothesis, I think it's going to affect this. And yes, then you can say, I think this is going to affect conversion rate. But the reality is there's so many more metrics in this. There's so many more factors. Like how people actually purchase, like if conversion rate is this very like trend type of metric, and it's not including what customers are buying, the cost, there's so many other things that are happening. So the way we are calling tests is almost balancing all of these metrics at the same time. So when I'm looking at a test data, it's like conversion rate, subscription, adoption rate, average order value being the main three. Like I'm not trying to just improve one. I'm trying to create this kind of perfect balance or harmony between the three of those.
I love that. You hit on two things that I think I really want to dig deeper into. So you said like, hey, when this first started, we were trying to like do these kind of like novel changes to websites. Like I feel like even like 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, there was these kind of changes you could make to the website that were novel and like actually resulted in like massive conversion changes. But it's not necessarily about chasing that anymore. Like I think we've like more or less figured a lot of those best practices out. So I want to go there, but I also want to hit on those trade-offs you were talking about, because I think when people get so hyper fixated on conversion rate or like CRO, like let's remind everyone, CRO is an acronym for conversion rate optimization. So like, hey, if you're only in pursuit of that one metric, you're not actually necessarily helping the business. Like the business is here to make money. The business is here to be around long term. How do we actually make that happen? So I want to hit on both of those. Maybe let's start with like these UX changes. So you said, hey, I've been doing this for a really long time. Maybe talk us through kind of like that timeline. Like, hey, 10 years ago, you could do this, you could see amazing results. And like over time, that has changed. And now you need to be looking at tests that are trying to do X, Y, and Z, or like this type of test.
Well, I think as much as to your point, we now have best practices, it also means consumers are understanding these best practices. I think there was some, I don't know if trickery is the right word, but part of
Strong influence.
Yeah, a lot of the basis, the principles of UX is, we're making something based off of like there's a lot of psychology of like how your eyes look, the one of the really basic things you first learn in like UX design or CRO is like the Z pattern of someone's eye is going to look on top left and then right, like, to follow your eyes following that natural path. And that's why every product page now has,
Yep.
the image left, text right, and then you have the CTA in the bottom right. Like this is a psychology pattern. And, those are things that I think there wasn't a ton of education on. And it was very novel and new. And there was still a lot of discovering those things. And now customers understand it as well. And that's what I mean by the trickery. Like there were certain there's certain these like marketing type CRO things, like how you display a discount or slashing off prices. And not to say it doesn't still work, but it doesn't have that efficacy that it used to. Like something I've seen recently as an example is we've actually reduced discounts, and that's helping conversion rate. And it feels if you told me that 5 years ago, it's very counterintuitive because discounting has historically been a way to get more people to buy. People love a discount, people love a sale. But now there's this perceived value of there's certain people that are like, wait, I know what you're trying to do. Like, just you're trying to get me to buy by giving a discount. So it's almost this inverse relationship now where they think less discount is, you know, less I'm trying to sell you on something.
Yep.
And I think that's like a big change I've seen where um I think people are just catching on. Like as much as businesses, we've been trying the same things and it's very different now. I think people also understand it. Like, and it's especially now that e-commerce is grown so much since it's also part of, you can buy on Instagram, you can buy on TikTok. So e-commerce has just evolved along a lot bigger than how it used to be. Um, and I think second of all, so like instead of just doing these basic like UX changes, that's obviously still a principle that guides, how things should look or be laid out. The things we can really make a difference on is these like larger business strategies. Like I don't want to just sell um this one product. I want to sell a bundle or I want to sell subscriptions or so instead of like being like I just want to optimize for someone to buy something, it's I want to educate a customer that what they really should be buying is a monthly offering or this more premium product. So there's still this like we're moving people into the products we kind of want them to, but it's more on like changing how the business actually operates and sells.
I I 100% agree. Like you were saying, the trickery, I think it's like the expectation is like once it becomes an expectation, it's no longer something that's going to be super motivating. And we're talking about the novelty of things. Like, remember when those spin to win things were like the hottest thing in ecom? And it was
They
like,
still
oh,
actually those still work.
but like, what I'm saying is like, there's an expectation now. Like, I see those spin to wins, and like, with my e-commerce like operator hat on, I'm like, I know why this is here. And then I put my customer hat on, and I'm like, I'm going to spin this thing and I'm going to get 15% off, which
Well,
like is what I'm normally going to
well,
do.
think about okay, Temu is huge, and you think of them and you're like, they're a cheaper brand, they're a cheaper marketplace, but people still buy from Temu, and it's the association though. Temu has a great spin to win. It still works.
They have
It's
so
still
much gamification now.
it's
So much
so
gamification.
much, and like even the way their marketplace is laid out, but that is their brand. Like their brand, they to your point of like people associate them and know them as this like the expectation is this is a cheap marketplace, and that's exactly how they gamify it. So, like, I think that works really well for them, but if you're trying to be a higher end D2C brand, or if your brand isn't the cheapest, lowest level in the market, then maybe some of this gamification isn't what's right for your, image.
Yeah, you gotta steal like an artist. One thing we say at Intelligems all the time is like there are no silver bullets, there are no best practices. It's like there's what works for you, your business, your customer, your marketplace, your brand. There's all of these factors that play into what's going to be successful for you versus someone else. And I loved on when you were talking there, like, hey, in the past, UX changes, these expectations, like it was all in pursuit of how do I eke out a little bit more conversion? How do I get more people to say yes to this? And for a variety of reasons, tariff, shipping rate hikes, iOS changes, like just getting more people to say yes isn't the be all end all in e-commerce anymore. So when you're saying like bundles, let's target AOV, let's do some experiments that are helping us boost AOV, boost subscription take rate. How do I move more high margin items into the basket? Like not even just AOV, but like which of these am I actually making the most money on? Which of these are going to give me the most profit dollars that I can reinvest into the business? Not just how do I get as much top line as I possibly can? That was a very valid strategy like 10 years ago, but just trying to boost your top line isn't necessarily, I would argue, like almost never now in e-commerce, the most successful endeavor.
Well, and I think it's also one dimensional. Like conversion rate is just the absolute number of orders. But there's two things. One, let's say, I mean, most companies have some sort of like cheaper an accessory add-on type cross-sell product. So if I sell a ton of that and your conversion rate's higher, your number of orders is higher, but this might be a $5, $10 product. Or, if you're a higher end brand, that's still what, like a $40 accessory compared to a couple $100 item, like it's going to take 10 times, 20 times those sales just to get to the, AOV of one of the actual items. Second of all, like you can really skew with your conversion rate, like with visit mix. So if I wanted like to make a really good conversion rate and that's all I'm looking at, cut out some of the acquisition spend, like do less campaigns, have less visitors in, and then it's gonna look higher, it's gonna skew. And so I think it's one dimensional. Just look at that, and it's kind of deceiving. Um, Obviously, not to say if your conversion rate tanks in any sort of way or like it's not to ignore it, but if you're only including that, you're missing the big picture of how your business is actually performing.
This comes back to like when I said, hey, let's talk about two things. You were talking about trade-offs. You were talking about like, hey, looking at this more holistically. One thing we talk a lot about at Intelligems is we call it GEM, or the growth experiment mindset, is like when you're running these tests, it's in pursuit of business growth. And like, hey, where am I going to get that business growth from? And you just gave a bunch of fantastic examples of like, hey, conversion rate up. I can gamify conversion rate up, but I can also have conversion rate go up and just be like, not good. Like convert, like in your example with the accessories, hey, I'm putting a bunch of these $10 accessories in, but like if you have a business strategy of we offer free shipping because we want a ton of customer acquisition, and you're now losing money on all those orders because like shipping that $10 thing costs me, I don't know, my margins on it, I make $2 and I'm spending $5 to ship it and I'm now in the hole. That sucks. But like, what if that offer was also moving someone into a subscription? Okay, I'm losing money on order number one, and my LTV on this customer is looking like this. And like, this is why, again, when you were like, hey, am I crazy? Like, no, it's not crazy to like to be so not be so one dimensional. This is the whole purpose of like, again, CRO in the past meant a very specific thing, but like testing and experimentation has become, I have an idea on how this business can grow. I have a question, a fundamental question that if I could answer, I could go change how my business operates. I could go find something that's going to monumentally change the business. And like, that's how I like to view experimentation. Is like, what's that big question? What's this decision that I could go validate and be like, there's enough signal here that we could like potentially change the business. Could we be more on subscription? What if I could increase my prices by 15%? What would happen if I dropped my prices by 15%? Would I make it up on the conversion? And it's all these crazy trade-offs. Like you're saying, it's expand the equation. Don't look at the raw number of purchases. Like, are you in pursuit of top line revenue? Cool. Are you in pursuit of better profitability in the bottom line? Even better, in my opinion. How do we actually do that? And how do we evaluate all those trade-offs and not just look at one spot? Because if we look at one spot, we're going to be completely blind to what's happening at the business level.
Yeah, and I think it makes analysis more complicated. There's a lot more to look at, and it's balance is the word, right? Like, and I think there are certain times where, you have to take intentional trade-offs of like, I'm willing to temporarily impact conversion rate by a marginal amount if I know that the win on like average order value or subscription adoption, or like there's also this like moving people into different products in your suite, or like maybe more premium version, whatever, or the bundle, like whatever your business offers. So that's also a different line of thinking. And I think prior, it's like right now, this is a conversion test. This is a this test, and it stays very like in one lane. And right now, it's like, okay, I'm willing to drop here to gain here, and then I know that now I have to go back and make that up. Um, but I also, in my opinion, like where we should be spending our time is strategy and analysis, right? You can automate that middle stuff, but like what's really going to make the difference is spending the time to be like, did this actually make a difference?
I I always refer to it as like the two most important questions in commerce is what's worth doing, and then when I decide to do it, did it work? And like if you can answer those two questions on anything you choose to do, you put yourself in a very good spot. And that's like what we've been talking about through here is like testing gives you the ability to say, is this worth doing? I don't want to go fully commit to this. I want to go figure out, is this worth doing? Okay, let's do that. Hey, we already decided to do this thing, or hey, we've been doing it this way for years. Well, let's actually figure out the efficacy of that and like be able to move this in a certain direction. And intentional trade-offs, balance, like those words you were using, like those resonate with me like so much. And hey, if this is crazy, like I want everyone to be crazy. I want everyone to be thinking about these things, expand the equation. But like, what in your opinion prevents people from thinking this way or approaching experimentation this way? And like any tips for your counterparts at other brands that are like, I love what Amanda's saying, but it's just not going to work with like my structure, my whatever. How do you help people break through that?
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things is that short-term loss. Like it's a hard, especially in e-commerce, which is very fast moving. It's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to be like, we temporarily are taking a hit on this because also like it if you're very used to monitoring, conversion rate or monitoring revenue or whatever that metric is on a daily basis, it might look bad for a day or two. Especially, if you're doing something that might be affecting like paid, which of course we're putting money into this, like that feels hard. Like our CACs
Yep.
temporarily went up or this went down. So but you need to, and I think especially explaining that to certain like executives or higher up, or even explaining it to the pay team is rough, but it's worth it if it's worth the long term improvement. Um, we've definitely seen, and I think it's hard. We talked about it's harder analysis. It's more to keep track of.
Yep.
So that's been, I think, one of the hard things for me is like it's the explanation of like someone's like, this looks bad. And I'm like, yes, this looks bad on a surface level where you have to look big picture. Like this went down, but it's because people shifted from here to there and this to that. And that's not something that I think becomes as easy. It used to be a lot easier. Conversion rate used to be 4%. Now my goal is to get it to 5%. And that is something that's like, just a comparison. Whereas now you have to look at the big picture. If not, maybe there's like a red flag or a sore thumb. But it's understanding how the business is operating and the whole ecosystem's operating. So I think that's the biggest hard part is like in isolation, one metric might look bad, or there might be a short-term loss. And those are two things that are like hard to grasp with. Um, I think like in order to kind of change your testing methodology of this, it's I've stopped referring to this as CRO like 5 years ago. Like, testing is like I said this earlier, testing is a tool. It's a way to validate something. It is not like what you do. It used to be like, and I know certain companies have like, you need to do 5 website tests in this week. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, I don't care how
Yep.
many you do. Um, if your tests are like not moving the needle. I could run 100 tests and like change one line of copy and make zero difference. Like there's no impact there. So if you think about it, this is the business change I'm trying to enact, and then testing is like the vehicle to do it.
You hit on a few things there. Like this is the business way of doing it, or you refer to it as the system. And I think like that's the most important piece actually is like there's the system, the business, the things holistically. And I think when people are using testing as a tool and not as like, oh, I'm like a CRO specialist, or I'm like the person who does testing, and I try to find, like you were saying, stack up 10 tests this week and like find winners. I mean, like, sure, you can do that, but like that should just be like the foundation. Like, okay, if I want to do that, I'm always doing that. And then I'm going to go in pursuit of some of these other things. And if you view things in isolation, then you will only ever find small wins. And that's where it becomes hard to justify outside of your org, outside of like your team, when it's like, I'm doing this. Because you gave a good example of like the paid media side versus like what comes in onto the site. Hey, on the paid media side, I'm running these experiments. More people are clicking through, more people are buying. Good. And then you look at it and you go, more people are buying $10 items and we're losing $3 per order. Bad. And like, I know that's like a really rudimentary example, but like if we don't view this holistically and we don't bring everyone into, we're validating decisions, we're answering questions, and we're just in pursuit of like win here, win there, then it all becomes disjointed. And like, I don't know, ecom needs strong operators at the center of all of this, like strong operators in the middle of a testing program to understand how all of these things connect with one another. Because another thing, like if we think about commerce as like multiple funnels, a lot of what was historically CRO and testing, like you were saying with the UX changes, is just like these top of funnel changes. But I think like what you're arguing and where this like the industry's going is you need more middle funnel. You need more bottom of funnel. Like how do I actually influence these things to a more profitable outcome, a more sustainable outcome, rather than, hey, order's good.
And I think one additional thing to add to it is we're talking about the holistic, like the impact on the business. But just if we're thinking about from the perspective of like the testing system or, your testing team, there's also diminishing returns if testing becomes this very small
Yes.
piece of the pie. Because, for example, of course I tested CTA colors. We tested CTA colors, huge win. And then when you back test it or you try another version, suddenly it's like the impact isn't there anymore. And so changing content, refreshing that is super impactful, especially as like, but but it makes more impact when your media mix changes, like your visitor mix changes a lot or your product changes a lot. Like over time, there's a difference. But if I just change my product description and I do it again in 2 weeks, like nothing's going to make a difference. I think that's also that type of testing is when you have a lot of these, um, I'm never going to reach that SIG because it's not impactful enough. And
Yep.
you also do alleviate that when when your testing is, I'm trying to change people towards this business goal. And, that's part of, instead of planning your tests, plan like it's almost more this is the business strategy and then testing is the way you do it, then you're going towards one direction versus if you're trying to plan just tests out, I can come up with 100 tests on titles and copy and this and that, but then you're almost just like running in the same wheel.
I 100% agree. When you're saying there, it's like planning the tests. It's like, no, instead of planning all these tests, like test the plan. What is strategically important to the business right now? What is keeping you up at night? Like, where are we going as a business? And like, hey, how can I help test? How can I help validate that that's true? How can I help figure out what direction we go from there rather than like stacking those small wins? And I think like TLDR of what we're saying here is like, if you view testing in isolation, you are going to lose. You will lose even harder if you view testing in isolation and then look at your tests on an isolated metric. We got to widen the lens here of what we're actually looking at, who's getting involved, got to look at it through the lens of the business. Amanda, before I let you go, kind of like for all the other crazies out there, what's your biggest piece of advice? Like, how do you get people out of these kind of like one-dimensional, isolated ways of thinking and like think bigger, broader, better?
Yeah, I think think about what would be ideal. Like the ideal is I want customers to buy X or do X. And then like you it's almost backwards plan on like what needs to change in order to get people to act that way. Like I want people to be purchasing this instead of this. So, okay, now my tests are a series of education on this. My tests are a series of like, how do I highlight this better? Like, those are all and now that's the like UX CRO traditional thinking,
Yep.
but it's like funneled towards one direction. And I do think we have to be bold sometimes. Like, we've done some really big changes to our entire structure, and it's not like I don't mean big changes like the template looks different. I mean big changes like traffic used to go here, now it's going here, or we used to sell the way we're selling our products are fundamentally different. But that's how you're going to actually see the decisions you want. And like I think also part of being bold is things that used to work aren't working anymore, and things that, you know, we maybe have to break some of these things we thought were true, like discounts and sales. Like, I don't think that they are sh- working the exact same way. And like, we shouldn't treat them that way. Like,
And this is why testing's cyclical, right? Is like you can't test something, find a win. I'm not even going to use the word win. Test something, get the answer, and then assume that's the answer from now until the end of time. We were just
it's a
talked about
back
like what's
test.
happened over the last, yeah, exactly. We just talked about what happened over the last 10 years. Like things are changing. Consumer preference is changing. The market is changing. Your product mix is changing. Like it's just so dynamic to think that we found something and like because it was true 8 years ago means it's true today. Like that's just fundamentally not true.
And the industry in the world has also changed a lot. Like, the education people have on the way people use e-commerce has completely changed. The way people understand certain like zero tricks has changed. And like now with, we don't even have to get into it, but like it's gotten even different with being able to buy on Meta, and now being able to buy on LLMs. Like everything
Yep.
fundamentally is changing on how consumers even act and like their behavior. So like, of course we can't be exactly the same way. And I think there's certain things that are tried and true, and there's certain things like w- the way we think about all of this needs to evolve.
Love it. All right. Amanda, for people who have made it this far, where can people follow along with you? LinkedIn, Twitter, newsletters, where can people get more Amanda?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn. I'll give you the link if you don't mind adding to the description. It's probably the best place. I don't have a public Twitter or anything. We work in this industry, so I know the truth behind it all.
Well, we'll get Amanda's LinkedIn into the show notes. You guys can connect with her there. Amanda and I have also been talking about just like finding more places to bring this conversation together. So I'll put a link to we call it the Gem Academy into the show notes as well. So if anyone's having any questions, like, hey, if you think you're crazy and want validation on whether you're crazy, you can drop some of those ideas into there. And either myself, Amanda, someone will jump in there and help with kind of the experimentation therapy session that might need to take place. But Amanda, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for coming to Jam.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been fun.